Hi all, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am Tedra Jackson. I work for the Michigan Developmental Disabilities Council, and I am joined today by Temeka Spruce and Jamie Jr. And before they introduce themselves, I would just like for folks to know that it is getting very dark outside my window, and I think a storm is going to blow through at any second. So I'm really hoping that my power and internet stays intact. But if I get disconnected, I just wanted everyone to have a heads up. Temeka, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Temeka Citchen-Spruce, as you can see here. And I am, my pronouns is she and hers. And I am a disability justice activist and filmmaker. And currently, I am the co-director of at the leadership program at Michigan Disability Rights Coalition. The name of the program is called LEAD. And so it's a leadership program for communities of color, like the parents of individuals with who are IDD. And I'm just really here to be happy to be here today.
And Jamie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Jr. I am currently the Advocacy and Community Education Coordinator for Disability Network of Wayne County, Detroit. I am also the Vice Chairperson of the Michigan Developmental Disabilities Council and advocate and activist in my area. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you. I hope you learned something valuable today.
Thank you. So you are in the session where we're going to be talking about intersectionality and how intersectionality impacts work as impacts advocacy and peer support. So today, we're going to introduce two concepts, intersectionality and multiple cultural identities. We're going to hear from our two panelists about their journey and how this has impacted their lives. And then we are going to get into some small groups, and we're going to give you a chance to talk about how what you hear can be applied to your work as a peer mentor or a peer support specialist. So as we are getting started, we just want to know from people if you could do a show of hands if most people are not on camera. So just with the hand raise function that's part of your Zoom reactions, if you could just let us know by show of hands, who is familiar with the term intersectionality? Do you know the term? Have you heard the term? I see no hands. So, Temeka, this is you.
Okay. So if you may not know what intersectionality, I'll just go and introduce you to the person who coined the term of the definition of what it means. So it was coined during the 1980s by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who I got to meet a couple years back. She's very nice, but it's Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. And so it was during the time when she was in law school, and she, noticed that she was experiencing, you know, racism from her peers as far as with trying to participate in activities at the law school. So she received, like I said, racism from the white men of lawyers, or you know, want to be lawyers, and then she faced sexism from the black men who were to be lawyers. So that really opened her eyes to see and to show how, you know, as a black woman, she experienced racism, and then she experienced sexism. And so it's just showing how different social identities, such as race, gender, in this case, the conversation, disability, also sexual orientation is another identity, but how, you know, intersectionality really is how does those different identities overlap with each other as far as with how society perceives you and your experiences. And so, but like I said, in Dr. Kimberly's Crenshaw example, she was talking about as far as with race and gender during the 1980s.
Thank you, Temeka. So one of the things that Temeka talked about was identity and the idea of someone having more than one identity and the intersectionality where all of those identities collide or where they meet. And just let's talk a little bit more about culture. Back to you, Temeka.
So as we see here is like a box and has different labels on it, but it says culture is learned and shared knowledge that specific groups use to generate their behavior and interpret their experience of the world. It includes but is not limited to things like communication. So what type of language, you know, do you use? So for example, like in the disability community, we have, you know, different terms. So like if you say S SCI, me, I know the spinal cord injury. So there's different terms that only people within that culture will understand. Things like rituals, things like values, what's important. One of the important parts of disability culture is like disability justice and what comes with values that comes with that. Also beliefs, practices, expected behavior, customs. So, you know, there's different cultures and subcultures that exist. And so culture applies to racial, ethnic, religious, political, professional, and other social groups. It's transmitted through social and institutional traditions and norms to succeeding generations. And culture is a paradox, while many aspects remain the same, as it is also dynamic, constantly changing. So, you know, that I think that's a really great example of what culture is. Another great version of culture, I don't know how many of you are hip hop, you know, into hip hop, or hip hop is especially during the 80s and 90s. You know, hip hop is more than just music. It's a culture, it's a dance, it's music, is the way you dress, the way you talk. So that's another great example of during the hip hop during the 80s and 90s, and how, you know, it was created a whole culture for a generation. So we have like the concept of culture. So again, what I spoke about before, like you have dress and age, gender, language, race, and ethnicity, and then it goes down into, it goes to like more, I'd say wider, so like facial expressions, body language, notions of modesty, decision-making processes, concept of justice and value, individual versus group. So, it goes wide and it narrows up of how, we define culture and what the concept look like. So, as my friend and peer here, JB, she loves, talking about, culture, how, disability could be one of those, is a culture in itself.
And I think, Temeka, one of the important aspects of this particular illustration, everything above the line are the things that we can see. So think about when you're mentoring or you're providing support. We like to think of the things above the line or the things that you can see about a person. And as Temeka said, it's really narrow. But as the iceberg gets larger beneath the line, those are all of the rest of the things that makes that person unique. And that makes me, or you. And so just really, this illustration is really just showing us how we see with our eyes. If we are sighted, we see a very small part of who a whole person is, which is part of our title today, All of Me, because we really are not able to separate our different identities, where you have to be your whole self all the time. You bring all of your identities, all of your culture with you everywhere you go. So one of the other things, this one was me, Temeka, just a couple notes about intersectionality versus multiple cultural identity. Intersectionality, as Temeka said, when it was started, Dr. Crenshaw was really talking about, when she coined that term, she was really talking about race and gender. It has evolved over time. We've evolved a lot. Society has evolved a lot since the 80s. Cultures have evolved a lot since the 80s. And so different people, when people are linking their multiple identities together, that integration is for multiple cultural identities really mirrors intersectionality. The difference from a justice point of view is that when you're talking intersectionality, you're talking about systems of oppression and marginalization that people also have to take into account when they are when they're recognizing themselves. So we have a couple questions. I have a couple questions for Jamie and Temeka. We want them to really be able to share their experiences with us, and we want to learn from them today. And so we've got a few questions for both of you. And our first question is, how did you start your journey to, I'm sorry, I lost that screen. Can you tell us about your journey to recognizing or realizing your whole person? What was that like? And how, especially growing up as women of color with disabilities, tell us a little bit about your journey to advocacy. I'm going to try and get my screen back while you're answering.
You want to go first, Temeka, or you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. So for myself, it's always been very obvious to me that I was a Black woman. So I was very fortunate that I had people in my life who were really, really cognizant of who I was, or really understood who I was. My grandmother said something to me when I was about 13 years old. That stuck with me my whole entire life. And what she said was, you go into the world with 3 strikes against you. So that means you have to pay very specific attention to who you are and who you portray to the world. Those 3 strikes that she was talking about was the fact that I was a woman, the fact that I was Black or African American, and the fact that I have a disability that is very, very visible. I have cerebral palsy, or CP, which people in the in disability culture recognize as cerebral palsy. And it affects the way people see me. When they see me coming, they see my Blackness, they see my disability, and they see the way that I present to the world. They see my gender presentation as a female. That started my journey, but the deep dive I took into myself and really accepting all of me came later on after I became a mom. And my son was diagnosed with a disability himself. And what I noticed from him was he was having difficulty accepting himself, and he was being bullied, and it turned into some anger, and there were just a lot of things going on. So in my effort to work with him and support him, I determined that in order to help him be the best person he could be, I needed to be the best person that I could be. So that really meant I needed to really do a deep dive into all of me. And the portion of me that I had kind of put on the back burner was my disability. Because when I grew up, my mom believed that I couldn't be a person who engaged in disability culture and still be successful. So I had to flip that concept on its head and really do a deep dive into what it meant to really be a person with a disability. And when I did that, I discovered a lot of strengths that a typical person does not have. So that's where my journey came from.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, that I grew up with a disability as well. I endured a spinal cord injury. Well, I was involved in a car accident when I was a baby, so that left me paralyzed from the mid chest down. So I grew up with a disability, and I also grew up in a predominantly white, all white school and things. So, you know, I experienced, especially during high school, I experienced things like, with racism from some of my peers. And I experienced things, a little bit related to my disability in school. Like I was mainstreamed, and which means that I was put into a classroom with peers my own age, in the correct grade, and that was called a crippled freak. And then that experience of issues, being a brown skinned woman as well. So I had a lot of issues growing up as a Black woman, young woman with a physical disability. But I, really came to, love myself after I, spent some time with a counselor, to kind of get to the roots of everything, of, where my issues and concept and, my negative image came from. And then that was around, I was like 25. And so that really just, kind of liberated, well, it did liberate me in the sense that, I am who I am. I'm proud of, happy, comfortable with, living within my own skin and who I am and my identity. So, but it did take me a while, to get there, to be comfortable with who I am. And I consider it's very liberating, accepting all of yourself and then not really caring what other people, you know, say. Um, and then the way I got to the disability work was actually through this wheelchair Michigan competition. That opened up my eyes where I met other women with in wheelchairs with spinal cord injuries, Black women with spinal cord injuries. So that was the first time I ever met anyone like that. So, that provided hope and mentorship and things like that. And it got me into the disability world and advocacy.
Thank you, Temeka and Jamie. And that last comment, Temeka, is a perfect segue into our next question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your justice and advocacy work and how you like working, how it helps you, how what you just described has helped you along in that journey?
So for me, the type of work that I do is from the disability justice framework. So that goes back to, um, like advocating for myself or how I see myself, or how I see others. I see, everybody's as a whole person. I see everyone as valuable, you know. So your value isn't based upon, your work or, superficial means that society see as value, but see person as a whole invaluable. And that really comes from, the disability justice framework. So, we don't have time today go into all what that is, but you can go to Google Sins and Valid and disability justice, and you can learn more about the principles and where that comes from. But so just based on my own experience, not having, I always had to advocate for myself. I always had to do that, and like with media, for example, I never saw anybody that looked like me or remotely, like me, that's authentic, in media. So that really inspired me to, to speak on the issues and to, tell, stories from underrepresented communities like myself and everything because, um, I think it's powerful. And I just feel like, like my whole life is has come full circle in the sense that, everything that I experience is not in vain. There's a purpose, behind it. And so, and that purpose is to advocate and tell stories. And so, um, I think that's, very important to me, like a core value, and it brings, meaning to my life, advocating for, different issues, particularly when it comes to issues of, women with disabilities, girls with disabilities, when it comes to, you know, um, people of color, BIPOC issues, because, I feel that sometimes within the mainline, disability is not rarely talked about. It's not really advocated on when, a Black or brown person issues with disabilities are, experiencing things not really talked about. So I just really want to bring light to, those issues and bring a voice to that.
Thank you, Temeka. Jamie.
So how does the concept of intersectionality affect my work, or how did it help me?
How has it impacted your work?
How
as
has
an
it
advocate?
impacted my work? Okay, so one simple word, beauty. As I learned how to find the beauty in all of the parts of me, I figured out that everybody else had beauty inside of them too. In America, we say this, that we are the great melting pot. I don't see it that way, because if you think about a melting pot, that means that everything has to become one big glob of the same thing. I think we, particularly us in America and in the disability culture, I like to think of us as more of a stew or a salad, because each of us bring a unique flavor, if you will, a unique characteristic that brings more to the whole. And if you think about paintings, you have so many colors. You can't pick out each. Sometimes it's difficult to pick out each individual color, but you can see the beauty in the whole thing. For me, helping people understand how to navigate the world in spite of their differences and the obstacles those differences create is really how my work was impacted. So, for instance, creating an advocacy campaign, if I'm advocating for something specifically related to disability, I have to really think about how different people with disabilities are impacted by something. For instance, I'll give a topic. So we can talk about the idea of the marriage tax that people with disabilities that receive entitlement benefits get. So regardless of what gender you are, or regardless to what gender identity you choose to express, regardless to what ethnicity or race you present to the world, we all have the same problem, right? If I receive Social Security or SSI and I want to marry my partner who has SSI, one of us is going to lose benefits. So not only does that affect me on a personal level, it affects me on a level of class. It affects me on a level of comfortability. So all those things, I say that to say that all of those little small things that sometimes we don't think about play into how we frame an issue. I hope I didn't confuse anybody with my answer. Hopefully I shed some light, but yeah. That's how it impacts my work.
No, I think you're good. You got an amen in there from Terrence. So I think we're rolling with you. Our next question is, what challenges or barriers have you faced in your getting to the point where you are now in leadership positions where you are coordinating programming for organizations and directing projects? What barriers or challenges do you face every day, and how do you overcome those?
So for me, many of the barriers that I face is mainly the barrier of being taken seriously. Because if you work in a disability environment that is not completely governed by people with disabilities, sometimes I have a neurological disability. So sometimes I stumble over my words or I'll repeat myself or it'll take me a minute to get my thoughts together. So because of that, people tend to dismiss what I have to say. So that has been a big obstacle. The other obstacle I think is sometimes people are not on the same page. Disability is one of those issues that is like, it's trendy. So because it's a trendy issue, it tends to become very political. And if you are interested in working with people and as a peer, as an advocate, that's my goal, to support people to thrive, to be their best selves. And if I have to deal with a bunch of political red tape or not being taken seriously, that makes it hard for me to do my job.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the same thing as well, especially with yeah, if you're trying to interact with people in a non-disabled, world, and things of that nature, yeah, it could be challenging that people don't see, sometimes don't take you serious, when a person of color or you're a woman, certain people, not all people, just but certain, you will run into certain people that don't take you serious, or if you're not in that clique, or you're not in that educational bracket, people sometimes don't take you serious. So it's hard. So that's why knowing, like for me, what I overcome, like people may not take it, serious, or when things, get political or whatever the case may be. It's just I have to, and I think it helps other people too, to just remind yourself, like why you there, like your why, and and know that you know what you're talking about, because people can make you think that you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, hold up, I know what I'm saying, I know this stuff and everything like that. So just being confident, you know, um, with your knowledge, with your experience, when you walk into or well into a room and understanding your why, I think definitely helps, with overcoming barriers.
Yeah, I amen everything you said, and I saw Terrence put in the chat that sometimes he feels like a token vet in his group. I've experienced that as well, the whole poster child thing where you're cute and you're non-threatening, so they have no problem with putting you out front. But when it comes to you using your voice, sometimes there's an issue there. So I think not only do we have to remember our why, but we have to remember our value. We are the experts in us. And if we hold that truth, then we can, like Temeka said, walk in confidence and sit or stand up against anybody else and say, have you rode this road that I'm on right now? No, you haven't. You've watched me do it, and maybe I make it look easy, but you haven't been there. You haven't seen the ups and downs. And I think that's why peers are so important, because we can give that. I've been there and it's okay. And I understand what it feels like to be tokenized and ignored, but we can come up with solutions together on how to at least within ourselves find our own beauty so that we can hold our heads up high and keep moving.
You guys are on a roll. Wow. So everyone, or mostly everyone in the audience, it offers a peer support service of some kind. What would you tell them about the importance of understanding? Why is this important to people that are providing service to another person in the same boat? Like if you're mentoring and everyone is not, like everyone on your roster isn't the same as you, we all have our differences. Why is it important for people to really understand this in their work providing peer services?
Because nobody experiences the same. Not really. I mean, as people with disabilities, yes, we have, I love to say that we are a culture unto ourselves. We have language in common, we have values in common, we have rituals in common. However, because I present to the world as a Black female, the way that I'm seen is a lot different. And if I make here, I'm going to use you as an example, as a white male, we're going to experience two different things. So it's important for me to recognize that absolutely no two personal solutions are going to be the same. We have to take each individual part into consideration, because we are one of my favorite songs, I want to quote it. So we are all our own individual masterpieces. And if we don't take the time to recognize that, it'll be very hard for us to do our job of helping to empower one another.
Yeah. And I was just like echo what you said, Jamie, and I think what also helped is like, just being empathetic, to people, listening to people, and when they tell you things, so being a active listener, and I just don't think everything. You know what I'm saying? So, because people are experts, in their own journey. So, the way you might approach people are different. And be like, okay, this may work for me, but because of their disability or whatever, guess maybe this might not work for them. But let's explore how would this, what are the solutions? How would this, what would work for you? They coming in like, oh, this is how you supposed to do it, and you supposed to say it like this, supposed to do it exactly like that. And that's just like, basic things like taking transportation. There's some stuff, of course, that is, and procedures people have to do, but I'm not talking about procedures, but I'm talking about how people see life or how they go about, moving. You have to be an active listener, being empathetic, and try to understand things from another person's point of view and keep their culture and upbringing, into an account.
That's very true. And additionally, part of our job as peers is to learn from one another. So our shared experiences are important. So the more I understand about the person that I'm working with, the more I can be an ally for change, not only for myself, but for them. And the next person that might come sit at my desk. It's, as you said, to me, it's very important to be empathetic and open-minded.
I think you make a really good point, Jamie. One for us to really think about as we move into our small groups. You say we learn from each other. And I think that sometimes people think that whoever is the mentee in a mentor-mentee relationship, the mentee doesn't have anything to teach. There's nothing to be gained from that person. They're there because they need help. And that is so not true. I think that Terrence in the chat, his comment about, walking toward the same goal together is really what peer services are all about. And if you're unwilling to really learn from that person being supported by you, because you never know what someone can teach you that can help you, that you could add to your toolbox, or they could give you a resource that you never knew about, but you have to be open to engaging and not just outreach to that two-way street of that peer service relationship. So we are going to move into our breakout rooms. Matt is going to move us into 2 rooms. You will be, I should put the, here, now we're at the breakout rooms, and here's our instructions.
2 or 3 rooms?
2 rooms will be sufficient. In each room, we're going to go in, you need someone to take your notes, someone that's going to come back and share to the group, and then a facilitator, which really just means that you're asking the questions. We want to talk about, the questions are, how much do you know about the intersecting identities of the people that you support? So really reflecting on the people that you support, and how much do you know about them? And how does knowing that, how can that impact your work as a peer? So you've heard Jamie and Temeka both talk about it in terms of their roles, coordinating, doing advocacy and justice work, leading out on projects, and really organizing and mobilizing people in advocacy. So now it's your turn to really think about it from your standpoint, providing peer service, either as a peer mentor or peer support specialist. I believe that is the term, please forgive me. It's your turn to answer these 2 questions, and then we've got this call to action for folks to really identify 1 or 2 ways you can increase your skill set in this area. So if you think, oh, I'm working with 4 people and I don't really know anything about them other than they have a developmental disability, or they have a mental health disability, and they're not able to, they want to be able to ride the bus better. Like, we want you to really think about the whole person, and how can you increase your skill set as a mentor in helping people and getting to know people better, and recognizing the whole person, and that the person that you're working with, their depth and breadth of the cultures and everything that they bring with them. So we are going to be in our groups for, time check, 15 minutes. And then when we come back from our groups, we're going to hear from both groups, hear the report out from both groups, and that'll leave us with a little bit of time for any questions, and it'll be close to the end of the day, so we'll wrap up. Are there any questions moving into the group, as we move into the groups? Seeing none.
Oh, I see that Alyssa had unmuted herself, but Alyssa, if you are speaking, we can't hear you. So if you're able to type your question in chat, that would be great.
Good catch, Jamie. It appears Alyssa's back on mute. Check the chat. Nothing in the chat. So maybe we'll hear from Alyssa when we come back from the breakout groups. Matt, We are ready. 2 groups, 15 minutes, please.
Awesome. They should be open for people to join. Did everybody get it? Let me try this one more time.
So, if I may, on your screen, if you're looking at your screen, there's gonna be a little box that pops up that says that, asks you to join the breakout room. If you click that button, you'll go right into your
Yeah.
room.
Just hold on for 1 second. I tried to turn them off to refresh them here. I just have to wait about 30 seconds here and I'll open them back up. But it should get a little pop-up message for you that you'll be able to join the breakout room here in about 30 seconds.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. You should see it now.
I don't know about other people, but I didn't get the pop-up.
Me neither.
Me neither.
Let me do this.
While we're waiting for that, I'm going to put our questions in the chat. Question 1. And question 2. And Jamie and Temeka, I don't know your thoughts, but what do you think of, if we can't get into the groups, what do you think about, there's not a ton of people in here, just having the discussion as a large group?
That works for me as a solution. How do people in the larger room feel about us doing that? Can we have, if you're able to use your emotions, can we get a thumbs up if you're okay with staying in a larger group?
So at the bottom of your Zoom, of your screen, there'll be a thing that says reactions.
I see a thumbs up.
Yeah.
From Kenyatta.
Yeah, I see lots of thumbs up. If you can't use it and you need to unmute and say, I'm okay with it, feel free to unmute.
Did that last piece work? Did anybody get a pop-up?
We did not.
Okay.
No, I think
Yeah.
we're just gonna stay in that large room. And, yeah.
So your questions, I will just go ahead and share them again, since we're all going to stay in one room. And I need to just go check on one thing. So Jamie and Temeka, you all are now said facilitators. And I will be back momentarily.
Okay. Tamika, you want me to take question 1 and you can take 2?
Yes.
Okay. So everybody, how much do you know about the intersecting identities of the people you support? And please feel free to unmute. We're just having a conversation like we're old pals here.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Absolutely. Okay, in a minute, I'm gonna have to pick on somebody.
I'm just gonna give other people opportunity to talk, because I love to talk. So.
Okay.
But I'm a veteran peer mentor for in Kent County Veterans Treatment Court. I'm also a certified peer support specialist that works with veterans with co-occurring trauma and addiction issues.
Mhm.
Right. So in our subculture, I don't know that we use that word much anymore, but the veteran group, there's a lot of intersecting identities, you know, because veterans come from all over the country. And the truth is, you don't really know a lot about any one particular person. It takes a long time to dive down into an individual that much. And I think that if I'm honest, most of the time I'm just kind of dealing with above the water iceberg stuff, and leaving the individual to deal with the below the water iceberg stuff. So that's an interesting, I mean, it made me think, the question that you're asking.
Yeah. Anybody else care to, I see that you unmuted again, Alyssa. We would love to hear from you if we can.
Okay, what was the question once again?
Okay, so the question was, how much do you know about the intersecting identities of the different identities of the people you support as a peer?
I can say based on my experience, because I no longer serve people directly, but what I always try to do is to make sure that each person I did serve, I knew little pieces about them that I could always keep with me, so that they could always be sure in knowing that they mattered to me.
That's
And what
good.
they said and how they represented themselves to me also mattered to me.
Awesome. Anybody else want to chime in here? Because I'm like Terrence, I can talk all day. But
Virgil Marshall, New Light Recovery Center. The similarities that we share, I like to base that as our intersections for most of my clients. We all have a likeness of some kind, of some sort. Although the solutions may end up being very different, we all have a likeness.
okay. Anybody else? No, I'm gonna attack it. Oh, go ahead to me. Were you gonna say something?
No,
Oh, so I wanted to tap in on something that Marshall said, that he usually uses the things that they have in common, their intersecting identities, which is awesome. That's not really what this question was designed to bring out, but you bring an interesting point. So shared experiences build trust, right? And in our work, it's very important that we build trust with the people we support. I also like what Alyssa said about knowing a little bit about the person and carrying that little piece of that person with you, so that they feel supported. That's awesome. And Terrence, you brought up, you used the term subculture. So I like that word. You said that you guys don't see yourselves as a subculture anymore, but it is that anymore to indicate that at one time you guys functioned in that way?
I think the word is not used much anymore, but when I was younger, these intersecting identities were actually labeled in college by my teachers as subcultures, you know, something less than the real culture. a group of collection that is part of the whole thing, but it's not really representative of the whole thing. And that might be why we got away from using the term like that. And the intersecting identities is a lot more broader. But yeah, I think we all are different subcultures. That's why the peer support works only if you're working within your quote subculture. If you are a heroin addict working with heroin addicts, I believe you have better results than somebody who doesn't, right? Then a veteran working with a veteran will have better results dealing with their trauma and diving into their different identities to help them come to a solution that works for themselves than a person. But then that could be just my own bias on it too. But I really think that's why peer support works as well as it does for us, is because you literally have to have lived experience with the dilemmas that you're dealing with. So.
Good point. Good point. Thank you so much. Thank you all for contributing to the conversation. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Temeka for question number 2.
Yeah, so how does intersectionality or multiple cultural identities impact your work as a peer? So, how does, when we talk today about intersectionality, multiple cultural identities, how does it impact your work as a peer? Let's hear it.
I think the easiest thing to recognize is, on your iceberg, you talked about language. There are different ideas that are well accepted in one group that would be foreign in another group. Like one of the favorite ones that I like to use is I was in court with a veteran and the judge asked him how he's doing today. And the veteran said, "You ever have one of those days when you just want to put a bunch of puppies in a bag and smash it against a wall?" And I use this because it's very illustrative, because if you're not a veteran that's been in combat, your first thought process on that is just a disgusting and a revolting comment to make. But to somebody else who's had friends die in their arms or watched massive destruction, it's kind of an apt illustration of pretty much saying he's having a really horrible day. But he's kind of like we kind of dodge the reality of the truth that we're trying to deal with. And we put something kind of humorous on it to make it more palpable for us to get through. And so I think that the different that's a cultural aspect of a very slice of those groups. And that's just one small example. The lady had brought up earlier hip hop in the 80s. I lived in Pontiac and my cousin was a break dancer. He did popping and locking. I mean, he was really good, but he went to Pontiac Northern, if you're from Michigan in that area. And but the thing is, my cousin was so good that he got beat up for it, because that's another side of that same. But when you're dancing and you do a dance, it means something completely different to the people whose culture it is than to the outside observer would be like, "Oh, that was pretty neat to see." Whereas somebody else who's in the culture realized that a major insult had just occurred. So when we try to understand our people, we kind of have to be very open and looking for these other nuances that in our normal life we would never take hold of. Because if we say something that we think is intelligent and point on, and they're barely going to take it and run it down, the person we're talking to might not understand a word we're saying because we're not talking in their same intersection. So I think it has a huge impact. And the more that we can identify as the other lady had said and hold a piece of that person in us, I think that the more prone that they are to be open to acknowledging that our experience, while different, may be applied to their life and their journey, but in their own way. I guess that's me.
Yeah, those are excellent examples. I know in my disability work, there are some cultures, predominantly in some cultures, that disability, substance abuse, mental illness, that is like huge stigma attached to it, even within some types of African American communities, huge stigma, that's attached to it. So, and then there is more than others. So it's understanding, when you, like what you said, Terrence, that we work with people who are different, cultures and things. You have to understand that some families, you're gonna bring shame and and all that. And so they don't really want to talk about it, and sometimes don't want to get help for it. And just as we're here to really be there and listen. Because in some families, it's like it is what it is, we're gonna deal with it, but some people in some cultures it's not like that. So yeah, that's great. Who else like to comment? Yeah, before we try the Jamie method, start calling on people.
Is Emma still with us?
I think she is.
Oh, Emma was here. I missed Emma. Oh my goodness.
She put a comment in the chat.
I think she's down. Emma, you still here? She has stepped away. Anybody else?
We got a message. She said, they say, yes, I am.
She must be.
You can't unmute. You can't talk. If you want to say something, please feel free. Anybody who does not want to unmute and talk and verbalize, if you have something to say, feel free. If you're able to type it in the chat, and I will be more than happy to read it.
So I know in the other sessions for the conference, you probably haven't had to do a lot of talking yourself. You've been primarily doing more listening. But for this topic in particular, we really wanted for people to kind of think critically, like our description said, like really think critically about this subject and how it could impact your work. And, think about how it's just how knowing some more of the bottom iceberg stuff can really help you serve your folks better.
Sorry about that, guys. One of my intersecting identities interrupted the conversation. I'm my mom. So and that brings up an interesting point. So I'm just gonna add a little bit. So let's remember that intersecting identities are not limited to gender identity, gender expression, race, ethnicity. Cultural identities are multiple. So you're a parent, you're a sibling, you're a wife, partner, you have many identities, even if you're an artist. Uh,
Yeah, that's true.
I'm sorry, Emma. I really, but I'm glad you're here with us. I'm so super glad you're here with us. That I'm smiling on the inside knowing you're here.
Yes, Emma.
Jamie, I think that you bring up a really interesting point and a point that really has to be considered, especially, when people, just from my work at the DD Council, we just like professionals and people without disabilities, people are always so surprised if someone with disabilities, especially like a woman, oh, they say they're a mom. It's like, oh, you're a mom and like, and just that, how, and I know Temeka's a mom too. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you, just a little bit about your motherhood, advocacy, justice journey, adding that other layer on top of it?
Sure. I can begin unless Tamika, you want to start?
I know you could go ahead.
Okay. So, again, being a parent for me was interesting because I was one of those people whose families initially did not support me being a parent because it was thought that it would be a lot more complicated. Actually, more complicated for my child than it would be for me. So that was a little hard for me. It actually created a lot of animosity in my family. But one thing it did for me was if I had to really point to one thing that really got my engine going about advocacy, I think it was parenthood. Because for no other thing in my life did I go and intentionally and purposefully look for support from peers. And it was very disappointing to me that I couldn't find it now with my limited experience at that time. But I couldn't find any support groups. It was really horrible. So that created something for me where now I want to do that. I actually want to start peer support for parents with disabilities.
Yeah. For me, is Josh, my kids are 9 and 10, so I'm still raising them and things like that. So, it's a challenge more so dealing with society, people looking at me, especially when they were small and, they might be, running around, but it just caused extra attention and people be like, well, who's helping you? One lady said, who's helping you at home? Or, like I could not really, raise a child and things like that successfully. And luckily, I do have, husband, partner, and stuff. So it does make it easier. But I feel that because of me being in a wheelchair and seeing them run around, acting like little kids, it just kind of stigmatized me, a little bit more because and people question my ability a little bit more, you know, uh, than with being in a wheelchair. And people still to this day be like, oh, your mommy's little helper, when my kids push me or they, just do things and, your mommy's little helper and stuff. And they kind of get on my daughter's nerves a little bit, when people say that and make such a big deal you know, about them being with me and helping me out and stuff. So it's definitely a stigma that's attached to it. But I love being a mom is the best, you know, the most important job that I will ever do. So it's, you know, but it is has its challenges.
Well, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. And I do think we should still ask if anyone identified, just through listening today, one or two things they want to share or put in the chat, unmute and speak, or put in the chat about ways that they can really increase your skill set in this area. Increase your understanding or your capacity to be able to help people more by looking at the whole person. Parent says to learn about things you know nothing about. That is, yes, that'll do it.
Well, I
Yeah.
want to add to that if I could though, Tedra,
Sure.
because I have to admit, when I was looking at the workshops for today's conference, the description of this conference at first blush for your workshop, I didn't feel like I qualified to listen. You know what I mean? Because it was going to be 3 independent women, females talking about their journey, all of the same race, you know, dealing with whole different set of disabilities than what I deal with, you know. So right off the top, you got the gender differences, you got the racial differences, and then the disability differences. And but what settled me on it was I said to myself, you know what? I know absolutely nothing about this. Why don't I listen and see what I can learn? And maybe I actually do have something in common. And through your panel discussions and you know, the iceberg that you put up and stuff, I realized that we actually aren't all that different. You know, we've had the injuries that we have are specifically different to us, but the path that we're on and overcoming is quite similar. So I can't thank you enough for y'all putting this out here and helping me feel welcome to be a part of your workshop so that I can learn more about different intersectionalities. So thank you again. You guys did a great job.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And that's what you have to be, to look at, you know, to learn about other people's experiences and everything. That's the best thing. 'Cause I know one thing, I just hate to be an ignorant, you know, person that just don't know nothing just based on my own. It's like so beauty, there's so many other people, you know, to learn about. So thank you.
Jamie, if you're talking to us, you're muted. But while we're waiting for Jamie to unmute, we do have the evaluation for the session in the chat. So if you would do us a favor, they love to get the feedback from all the sessions. It helps them with planning for the next year. And so thank you for putting that in there. And Jamie, you're going to get our last word.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm actually gonna bring into the room something that's in the chat from R. Wayland. I need to recognize differences in others, noticing similarities, asking questions, and listening. And I think you're spot on. Terrence, I think you're spot on. That's what it's all about, because we're actually more alike than we are different if we really get below the iceberg.
Yeah.
I do love that iceberg illustration. I might share it with Tracy and Pam. They might be able to incorporate it in their training or their continuing education that they do with the peers. Because I think it really helps people to kind of understand the concept of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you all for joining us. It was so wonderful to be with you all and share our experiences. I hope you learned something. I learned something from Terrence today. I learned something from Alyssa, from all of you guys.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Terrence, we're really glad you decided to join. Everyone have a good evening and try and stay dry out there, because I think the rain is coming for us all today. That is it for us. Have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.